Welcome. Tonight I will tell you a story about life within a caravan crossing the Sahara. Make yourself comfortable, save this video, and let it carry you gently into a peaceful sleep. Now, let us begin our journey. You wake to a sky so full of stars it feels heavy, a black bowl pressed with a million cold nails. The air is knife clear and bone dry. It slips into your mouth and steals what little moisture your sleep managed to save. Your tongue feels like a strip of leather left in the sun. Sand whispers as you move, each grain its own tiny rasp, because the desert remembers every gesture and edits it down to sound. You are not in a room. You are a shape on a rug, wrapped in a wool cloak that smells of smoke and animal, your head on a saddle folded twice. The night has left its chill in the fabric. Somewhere close, an ember bed under a dented kettle holds onto a last, stubborn red. It gives off a ghost of heat and the thin, sweet scent of mint bruised last evening. A water skin, the good kind, heavy and oiled, lies beside you like a sleeping dog. You pick it up and it resists. You drink and the water is warm, tasting faintly of leather and yesterday. It is also perfect. You stop after 2 swallows because here even thirst has rules. The camp is a low murmur in the dark. Goat hair tents make blacker triangles against the black. Ropes staked with wooden pegs, flaps tied down with neat knots. Bundles sit in ranks, each lashed with braided palm fiber, each marked by a strip of cloth so the right load finds the right animal by touch alone. A pile of firewood amounts to 3 armfuls of thorny brush. Fuel has a different arithmetic here. A man squats by a small brazier and teases flame from charcoal with a breath he measures like money. Tin cups wait upside down to keep the night out. The animals are awake before the men. Camels mutter in the dark with that wet, bubbling complaint that sounds like a kettle trying to speak. Jirr. Kneeling, they are tall. Standing, they are a landscape. They smell of sun and sour milk and long journeys. Their padded feet spread like little snowshoes when they rise. They complain again and then accept. Each one wears a bell small as a fist on a rope throat latch, different tones so the caravan can hear itself in the dust. Leather saddles shaped like inverted V's lie ready, with blanket stacks to save ribs and spine, girths of rope that won't stretch, and a net of cords for loads that would rather not be carried. Someone claps once softly and the camp sighs into motion. There are no shouted orders, just the choreography of practiced work. A boy goes tent to tent loosening guy lines. Canvas falls into his arms and becomes cord and cloth with 3 easy folds. 2 men lift a salt slab together, white and rough as the side of a great cheese, and lay it across a wooden frame to make a balanced burden. The slabs are cold to the touch even now, cold like shade. A woman wraps a bundle of indigo cloth in waxed leather. It leaves a bloom of blue on her palm she will not waste water to wash away. Another tugs at the stitching of a waterskin shoulder with her teeth to check the seam. Satisfied, she slaps it flat to force the air out and ties the neck with a twist you cannot follow. Breakfast is an argument the night has with day and wins only briefly. Flatbread warmed on the brazier's lid, a few dates torn along their seams with the thumb, tea boiled until its bitterness is a sort of courage. The tea comes 3 times from the same leaves, First harsh, second strong, third sweet, poured from a height so it foams, then returned to the kettle to be tamed again. The little glasses burn your fingers, and that is part of the kindness. Heat is a food here. Someone cracks a joke too dry even for the air, and the circle answers with breath more than laughter. Dawn is close, everyone can smell it. You stand and the desert edits you down. Sand takes your weight with a small sigh. Cold air slides out of your cloak and is replaced by the awareness that it will not be cold for long. East is not a color yet, only a thinning. The guide, the one who holds the day in his head, walks a few paces away and tips his chin at the sky as if it were speaking. His face is a map of long light and long silence. He has a cord wound around his wrist that could be a tether or a measure. He has a way of counting steps with his breath. You realize that in this place the clock is at your heels and in your chest. WOULDN is a ritual without music. Camels are brought to their knees by a rope looped around a front leg. Their long bodies fold with an elegance that looks like patience but is really physics. A man heaves a salt slab into place and slides it until it sits like a rider. A second man threads the lashings through and over, tightening them with a twist of a stick slipped into the rope, a tourniquet that forces compliance. The rope hums when it is right. A third man ties the long tails into knots so quick you can't see where one ends and another begins. The animal chews and resents each stage out loud. Then it stands, and the load becomes part of it. You are given a headcloth and shown a way to wrap it that turns wind into a rumor and sun into a suggestion. The cloth makes the world narrower and therefore kinder. It also makes you louder to yourself. Your breath sounds like someone else's whisper in a stairwell. A man touches the cloth at your cheeks and nods when it lies flat. He pats your shoulder the way one pats a bundle that will ride. By the time the east admits gold, the camp has vanished into itself. The brazier is overturned, the ashes buried. The tent pegs are in a small bag. The wood is gone. The tea glasses are nested in a cloth that will smell like mint for the next 5 days. The only proof of sleep is a gentler patch of sand, already combed by the wind. The caravan lines up not in a parade, but in a sentence. The guide at the point, then the animals with salt and cloth and hides and impossible bundles, then the people, then more animals, then the rear guard who sees what gets dropped and what tries to follow. The bells speak to one another softly. I am here, I am here, I am here. The sun lifts like a lid. Light hardens. Color drains out of things that don't deserve it. The sky turns from velvet to iron, the sand from story to glare. Shadows sharpen and shorten. The first heat is like a hand on the back, persuasive rather than cruel. You use that hand to go. Each step is a negotiation. The sand offers, you accept, the sand retracts, and your calves learn humility quickly. You try to walk where others have walked because the sand there has already agreed to the terms. The guide chooses a line that seems to avoid nothing and also never climbs when it could skirt. He prefers the long easy to the short steep. He reads the wind's handwriting in the ripples and chooses a path with fewer verbs. He never looks lost because he is not looking for the same thing you are. He is looking for an angle of light on a dune face, a whisper of a dry wadi, a plant that remembers water under the skin of the earth, the way a horizon fades differently when the day will be hard. When he lifts his hand, the caravan slows, then stops, the way a flock turns, as if everyone had the same thought at once. You are assigned a camel. It looks down its nose at you because that's how camels are built. Its eye is lacquered and long-lashed. Its lip splits when it chews. Its teeth are the color of old ivory and the shape of someone else's mistake. You put your foot on the cross stick and your body forgets how to be vertical. The world retilts under you. The saddle bites where you are least convinced you possess muscle. The animal stands in two motions, back first, then front, and you are taller than every problem you have ever had, and also balanced on all of them at once. The first pace is not a pace but a cradle. The camel's walk is an argument with gravity. It wins slowly. Your spine learns a new grammar, left, right, left, a sway that is almost music if you stop resisting. Leather creaks, rope sings, sand hushes, bells mark time without ambition. The line stretches, kinks, uncoils. If you stare at the horizon, you will count 100 heartbeats and think you have moved none, and then you will look down and see your footprint walking beside you 20 minutes behind. Smell simplifies. There is you and animal and sun. Smoke is behind you. Spice hides in loads you are not allowed to open. When wind comes, it carries nothing but itself. When it does not, the air is so still you can hear the sand's skin tightening. A fly tries your eye and discovers your cloth learned that lesson yesterday. You lift your water skin and do not drink. You put it down again because thirst is not an emergency until someone says it is. The weight on your back that is not a pack is the law. There are marks of other lives in this emptiness. A knuckle bone of a gazelle whitened to porcelain. A loop of cord half buried. The desert eats everything slowly and chews the hardest on knotwork. The faint comb track of a beetle's evening thought. A black stone that registers as a sentence among 1,000 soft ones. The heel print of the guide where he stopped last time. He checks it with the side of his foot in passing, not to admire but to learn whether wind has changed the world in a way he should respect. When the sun clears all arguments and becomes a coin you cannot look at, the caravan is already where the guide wanted it to be, a shallow basin between long dunes, the kind of dip where shade can be made from the shadow of a load and time can be made from the shadow of a hand. But that is later. Now is the going, the part where the day is still making its demands politely. And yet your body has registered the invoice. Your lips split when you smile because your mouth forgot this is the wrong country for smiles. Your skin tightens at the wrists and around the eyes because air here writes its name on you in small, private letters. Your breath is a metronome that counts the guide's decisions. Your thoughts have edited themselves down to 3: water, shade, and how far it is to whatever comes next. This is the first truth, and the desert states it without raising its voice. You would not last a day in a Sahara caravan. Not because the heat has arrived, it hasn't yet, but because even dawn here is a negotiation you are too rich to understand. The tea is measured, the water is measured, the steps are measured, the shade is measured, the words are measured. The sun hasn't spoken, and already the desert has asked you to pay with everything you didn't know was coin. The sun does not rise so much as harden. What was silver along the dune's edge becomes brass, then white. The breath you could see only minutes ago disappears, and with it the last softness in the air. Cloaks are folded and tied across saddles. Headcloths are retightened until the world is reduced to a slit of light and the sound of your own breath. The caravan settles into its morning shape. The guide walks at the point with a staff that touches the sand in a tempo everyone learns without being told. He looks at the ground the way a reader looks at a page. Ripple height, the direction of the cat's paw, where a faint breeze has combed the surface, a line of darker grains telling of a steadier wind in the night. Every so often he pauses, squints at the low sun through narrowed lashes, and checks the angle of a shadow with the stick laid flat on the sand. He is not measuring minutes, he is measuring the day's promise. Behind him string the loads that make the caravan a town in motion. Blocks of rock salt sit like pale bricks, white as bone, sweating faintly, cold against the hand even as heat rises. Bales of woven cloth in indigo and henna brown are wrapped in oiled leather to keep out the sting of dust. Skins of water sway heavy on each flank. They creak where the leather strap crosses hair. Smaller bundles hold brass bowls, copper pans, dates pressed into cakes as dense as wood, cones of sugar wrapped like little pyramids, a roll of bright glass beads that will become stories in another town. Every parcel has a place. Every place is learned by muscle before memory. The cameliers move like tailors among moving furniture. One slips 2 fingers under a girth and pulls the lashing one more notch with a stick used as a tourniquet. The rope hums when it is right. Another checks a sore spot under a saddle blanket, rubs in a thumb of tallow mixed with ash, and pads the rub with felt cut from the hem of his own cloak. A bell's note changes and a boy hears it. He adjusts a knot without looking. No one speaks loudly, words are water. You learn the desert walk, the way to put your foot down and then let it slide half a hand's width so the sand finishes the step for you. You learn to keep your arms loose, to let your hips answer the camel's swing without fighting it. You learn to breathe through the cloth without arguing about how small the mouth of the day has become. You learn not to lick your lips. You learn to count without numbers. 20 breaths to the next ridge, 100 to the next shadow, a rosary of steps tied with knots of patience. Clothing is a technology as precise as any instrument. The headcloth is pulled low over the brow to make its own shade. The trailing end wraps across nose and mouth and pins behind the ear, a hinge that can be opened to drink and closed to speak less. Coal darkens the rims of eyes to steal a little glare. A smear of clarified butter across the lips buys an hour without cracks. Sandals are thick leather with rawhide thongs. Where the thong crosses the toe, a sliver of soft cloth prevents a wound that would matter too much. Some walk barefoot in the morning to feel their way along the packed strips where wind has made the sand into boards. All of it is knowledge that was once paid for in blood and now survives in habit. Water is not drunk, it is negotiated. At an agreed signal, 2 notes on a bone whistle, low and close. The line slows but does not stop. Water skins are lifted and rocked, not to hear the slosh, too dear a sound to waste, but to feel the weight against the wrist. A man sucks a mouthful and does not swallow it. He presses it to the roof of his mouth and lets the throat decide on its own. Another wets his headcloth at the edge and presses that tiny coolness back onto his cheeks where the cloth touches skin. A woman crushes a date in her palm, licks the paste, and puts the seed back into her pouch as if even the idea of fruit belongs to the caravan's ledger. Songs are not entertainment, they are metronomes. A front voice lifts, a thread of melody about a river 200 days behind, and from time to time the line replies under the breath, a sound like wind behaving itself. The rhythm keeps the feet honest, keeps the beast in tone with their bells, keeps the day from dissolving into blankness. When the guide raises his hand, the song folds into silence so thin you can hear the scrape of a single grain of sand against the leather of your saddle. The land changes without warning, not in color but in grammar. The easy rolling sea of the erg gives way to a hardpan reg, stone fields where the sand thins to a whisper and the world becomes a pavement of pebbles as old as the first story. The caravan tightens here, the animals pick smaller steps, the bells go quieter. Then a bruise of darker ground, sebka, salt flat, treacherous after any rain, its smooth crust a lie underfoot. The guide skirts it in a curve you would not have chosen, adding an hour to save a day. A rib of hamada, baked plateau, lifts the whole line for a view, and to the east you can see the skeleton of a wadi, where once in a time remembered in song but not in bone, water ran like language. Heat climbs you hand over hand. The chill that lived at your wrist climbs up your sleeves and evaporates. What wind there is feels like a breath from an oven door. Shadows shrink into mean little blades under every object, under a hoof, under a knot, under the lip of the waterskin spout. The air shivers. Mirage lays a sheet of tin across the horizon and then rolls it up again. You begin to taste metal that is not there. Tacks of work repeat in small economies. A rider slips down to walk beside his beast, not for pity but because men trade places with animals out here, share the burden by minute and yard. A woman checks her saddlebags with her hands and her memory. She finds the small kit with needle and palm fiber thread and stitches a webbing strap before it becomes a problem. A boy trots back to the tail of the caravan to fetch a bundle the sand stole and returns by stepping in his own fresh prints, tidy as writing. A child no higher than a camel's knee keeps a tally in the oldest ledger, pebbles. 1 stone for each full water skin in a pouch at her belt. When a skin is drawn down, a pebble moves to a different pocket. She does not count wrong. At the halt, she will pour the 2 pockets into 2 separate hands. How much the caravan has, how much the day has already taken, and the quartermaster will nod in a language without adjectives. By mid-morning, the heat has intention. Sweat, where it dares, leaves salt commas on the skin and vanishes. Your fingers feel thick. Your thoughts narrow to the joint of your jaw and the soft place where your hatband presses. The camel's breath warms your leg through the cloth. The leather of the girth squeaks. A fly lands and wanders undecided, as if even nuisance must be measured here. The guide turns his head slightly, listening to nothing you can hear. He scans the dune faces for a scar, a cut where the wind wrote more angrily, a line where last year's caravan broke the skin and left a seam. He shifts the whole line 100 paces off the route he walked last month, because something about the sand says it would rather collapse today. No one questions him. Questions cost breath, and breath costs water. A pause is called without stopping. The line slows to half, then a quarter. You tilt the water skin and give your mouth a promise. A date is rolled in the palm until it is soft and then pressed to the tongue so its sugar becomes a story you can believe for another hour. Someone breaks a piece of hard cheese, the salt stinging the place where your lips have begun to crack. You feel alive so keenly in that sting it could be a prayer. You start to understand why the caravan begins in the dark. Morning is not mercy, it is rehearsal. The real day is waiting in the white noon ahead, and everyone is already making themselves smaller for it. Speech, steps, needs, the size of a thought. A man loosens his belt a hole to tell his body to be patient. A woman shifts her weight 2 inches forward in the saddle to spare a bruise that might be tomorrow's trouble. The child with the pebbles takes one out and puts it back in the same pocket, reminding herself which is which. Even the bells seem to lower their voices. When at last the guide lifts his staff high and lets it fall, the caravan flows into a shallow basin like a river remembering its bed. Loads are eased to the ground with ropes that save backs as much as goods. Camels groan, then fold like tents. People pull their headcloths down around their necks and look for the smallest possible shade. The lee of a bundle, the thin blade under a saddle's plank, the one patient strip of shadow spun by a stake. Fires are not lit. Noon is not a time for flame. Someone pours a thimble of oil into a palm and shares it. A trace for lips, a wipe over a child's cheeks, the remainder rubbed into a cracked heel. Tea will come later, when the sun's voice drops half an octave. You realize your mistakes without being told. You drank for comfort instead of need. You walked a little proudly on the ridge instead of quietly in the trough. You stared at the bright line on the horizon until your head rang. None of these are crimes. In the desert, they are simply prices. This is the second truth, spoken while the day is still only sharpening its knife. You would not last a day in a Sahara caravan because mourning here is already a discipline. Every gesture is rationed, every comfort postponed, every mile purchased in coins you didn't know you carried. Skin, spit, attention, silence. The heat has not even spoken, and already the desert has taught you the budget you cannot keep. The caravan rises again as if pulled by a thread you can't see. A hand lifts, a bell answers, ropes slide through practiced palms. Loads return to spines, spines become landscape. The guide steps into the bright and the whole line lengthens behind him like a sentence that has remembered its grammar. You enter the Dunal Sea proper, the erg, where the world is written in curves. Nothing here is straight except the light. Dunes stand in ranks like sleeping animals, each with a windward back and a leeward face cut sharp as a blade. Their edges are drawn so cleanly that even the air seems pared thinner near them. The sand itself is not one thing, coarse on the backs where the wind combs, fine on the slip faces where it pours. Grains burn under the sun and cool a thumb's depth below. When your sandal bites down, heat and not heat trade places in an instant your skin can feel. The guide refuses the high lines no matter how they promise a view. He chooses the saddles between backs, where footing is a whisper instead of a trick, where shadows at noon are threads and still worth chasing. Camels read the same page. Their feet spread and take back their shape with every step. The sound they make is not a footfall, but a settling. Rope creaks. Leather answers. Bells turn the hourglass over and over. The caravan breathes in one chest. You learn the dunes etiquette. Never walk the knife edge. It breaks, and when it breaks, it goes all the way. Don't climb a slip face if you can circle it. Each step that sinks half its promise will cost you twice in breath. Follow the faint braided track of last week's line if the wind has allowed it to live. Sand is the only paper that sometimes remembers. Trust the low. The high belongs to the sun. Mirage begins its day's work. Heat edits the horizon until it looks like a blade of water lying on polished stone. Palms that are not there tremble in pools that are not there either. The guide does not look at them. His eyes stay near and low, the tilt of a ripple shadow, the color shift where damp once lived, the sparse grammar of green. A plant appears, half a grass, tight-fisted and mean with its shade, and vanishes behind you in 3 breaths. Another offers a flower the size of a coin, pale and stubborn as a scar. Thorn scrub squats in the lee of a dune like a thought you can't quite recall. Each piece of life saves its wet, stores it at the root, spends none. The caravan stretches and contracts like something alive. When the sand goes soft, the line thins so that each animal can make its own decision about how to take the ground. When it firms into packed ripples, hard as old bread, the line draws together, bells overlapping like a well-argued chorus. A boy runs ahead and plants a stick at the place where the guide wants a turn. By the time you reach it, the stick is a direction, not a request. No one speaks the word left. The sun is that word already, written everywhere. Every hour, small tasks prevent large ones. A camelier slides a palm between blanket and wither to feel heat that means sore before sore becomes wound. He pushes a folded scrap of felt into the place where hair has polished to a shine. Another reties a twist on a waterskin's thong. A bad knot is a theft from tomorrow. A woman rubs a dab of ghee into a split lip and touches the same finger to a child's nose where sun has begun its petition. Fingers learn to do this without looking. Shadow work under a light that is not kind. Sound reduces and refines. The day discards everything that is not necessary. A fly announces itself like a sentence. A grain ticks against your ankle like a minute. The camel's breath is slow and astonishingly wet this far into the morning. The bells keep time, hollow, bronze, slightly askew, with a music that is almost not the ears but the bones. When the wind lifts, it does not whistle. It hisses the way silk hisses when you pull it through a ring. Words, when they come, are shaped small enough to fit behind the cloth across a mouth. You begin to notice how the caravan shares its body. A rider dismounts on the windward side so the beast's shadow doesn't vanish under him. A child passes a date forward, not back, because back means losing count. Someone drops a peg. The rear man picks it up and threads it into the net of a load 2 animals up without changing his stride. The guide stops once and once only to draw a shallow mark with his staff along the face of a dune. When the last animal passes, the mark is gone, filled by the smallest slough of sand, and you understand what it meant. Nothing here belongs to memory unless you insist. Life leaves signatures you learn to read. A drag line where a lizard pulled itself from cooler sand at dawn, the paired commas of a jerboa's back feet between long, neat poles of its tail, the looping braid of a beetle that prefers the lee to the light. Near a thorn tuft, a fox print as sharp as a stamp. It ends at a hole as small as your fist. Above, a vulture writes patient circles in a sky without scale. You taste salt you do not see and know that the salt is yours. Heat finishes its argument with air and begins on you. Fabrics grow hot to the touch. The wooden pegs of a saddle creak as if the animal beneath them were old wood too. Sweat, such as it is, shows itself only in blossoms of white on the cloth. The bodies in the caravan have decided they will not waste water on the skin. Your eyes ache inside their coal. When you blink, sand moves in the corners and complains. Your tongue is a dry animal that wants to lie down. The guide angles the line along the wind. Little devils of dust spin and collapse at the edges of your seeing. The dune backs sing, real singing, a low organ note when a slipface slides. A child laughs once and is shushed with a hand on the head, not to forbid joy but to save air. The bells soften as beasts tire, and the men answer by humming under their breath, a drone that props up the bell's work. You pass the skeleton of a well, a ring of stone gnawed flat by years of ropes, 3 poles fallen into a public star, pottery shards like teeth around the rim. The sand between the stones is stamped with old hooves and older bare heels. The well is dry. It is not a mistake to have come this way. It is a lesson the guide keeps in his pocket like a smooth pebble. No one goes closer. Hope has weight too. On a long, hot back that has never known a footprint, the guide stops and waits until the line draws even. He points not with his hand, hands are for work, but with his chin and a soft click that might be for the animals or for the people or for the day itself. There, the faintest discoloration in the trough ahead, 3 shrubs where there should be none, a butterfly where there should be no river of air to carry it. Water is not a pool here, it is possibility. A shallow basin might hide a sheet as thin as a blade under the sand, or only damp sand, which is sometimes enough. He will not check now. He puts the knowledge away for evening the way a woman tucks a needle into cloth. By late morning, your hands have learned a new piety, to wait. When you lift the water skin, the gesture stops at your throat and returns the weight to your shoulder. When you imagine the shade, your eyes stop squinting at distance and drop to the shadow under your own foot, a slice of dark that travels with you and counts like a friend. When you think of rest, you lean into the camel's rhythm and let the saddle remind your hips what swaying is for. There is a small crisis and it does not become a big one. A lash cord frays where it crosses the edge of a salt slab. A single thread of palm fiber has been rubbing like a saw since dawn and now gives up. The load lists, the camel lurches, the bell stutters, and 3 men are already there with hands that know. One takes the weight with his shoulder. Another passes the standing stick that turns a loop into a lever. A third strips a thong from his own sandal and feeds it into the knot until the failure disappears into strength again. No one speaks. The camel belches its complaint and forgives. Now the dunes tighten, shorter backs, steeper knives, and the line scrolls a longer S to thread them. The sun stands over you the way a question stands over a child in a classroom. The air tastes of metal and the memory of mint from a page you are not on yet. The guide's steps shorten. Everyone's due. Your breath tries to hurry and is reminded not to by the cloth over your mouth, which rules like a kind teacher. You will breathe as slowly as the day allows, or you will pay. The caravan hums the old march again. One voice ahead, the soft reply behind, a meter that lengthens the stride by refusing to change its speed. A woman ties a different song around her child's wrist, a bracelet of blue beads against the eye of the world, and the child sleeps sitting up, head rolling with the camels pacing as if the animal were rocking a cradle on purpose. The bells return to their work, a little brighter, as if they too believe in the basin the guide has put into his pocket. At last the sand itself instructs a halt, a low bowl ringed by backs, its floor a mosaic of ripples that say wind has been kind here. Loads come down in careful swallowings, ropes sigh and then fall asleep on their coils. Camels fold with the grace of tents remembering how to be cloth. Men and women hollow shade out of nothing, tilting a slab, leaning a blanket on a stick, pulling a saddle into a small roof that can shelter 2 faces side by side. The ground under your palm is hot. The underside of your palm for a second is cooler than anything in the world. Tea appears like a reason to continue. A little charcoal, saved from last night, takes a spark coaxed from flint and patience. A dented kettle accepts a rationed mouth of water. Leaves go in, bitter, fierce, and boil till they argue. The first pour is for the desert, tipped onto the sand to teach it manners. The second is for men. The third for children and women. The fourth for stories. Sugar drops clink in the bottom of tiny glasses and do not melt at once. The tea climbs the throat and wakes a part of you that does not think of thirst and thinks of heat differently. The mint is a green you can taste. As you lift the glass, your hands shake. Not hard, but enough to make the light inside the tea tremble. Your shadow has narrowed to a ribbon. Your lips are cracked in 2 precise places where laughter used to live. Your eyes sting not from emotion but from light behaving without sympathy. You have learned perhaps 10 new ways to be patient and forgotten 9 of them at once. This is the third truth, and the dunes speak it in curves you can feel with your bones. You would not last a day in a Sahara caravan because motion itself is labor here. Each step bargained for, each breath budgeted, each sip accounted to a ledger older than roads. The desert charges you not for miles but for minutes, not for mistakes but for inattention, and by noon you are already in debt. Noon arrives like a verdict. The light that was merely fierce becomes absolute. Shade is no longer a place but a knife edge the world holds stingily under each object. the air stops moving. Even the bells seem to hesitate before making sound, as if noise itself might cost moisture. The caravan has folded into its midday shape, low, careful, almost invisible from a distance. Loads are set down with the gentleness taught by sawbacks. Saddles lean against bundles to make small roofs. A blanket becomes a wall when one stick holds it and a salt slab agrees to be a pillar. Everyone knows where to sit so that two shadows overlap and make a third that is barely enough. You slide into your ribbon of dark and feel heat radiate from the sand through the cloth, as if you were a letter being pressed under a seal. Camels fold their long legs under themselves and turn into furniture. Tall backs, warm flanks, a smell of sun and cud and old leather. They chew as if time were their invention. Flies find the wet corners of their eyes and are whisked away by lashes that look like brushes. A cameleer slides a hand along a jaw, rubs the hinge in small circles. The animal grumbles, sighs, forgives the day for a minute. No one lights a fire. Noon is for flame that stays inside your body. Food comes out of pockets and cloths and the corners of saddlebags in quiet math. Dates are split with a thumbnail and pressed flat on the tongue until their sweetness finally decides to be a liquid. A sliver of dried meat, thin as bark, disappears without chewing to save spit. Bread, last night's, softens when you hold it in your palm and ask politely. A pinch of salt is licked from a fingertip. The sting makes your cracked lip remember itself and then accept the bargain. Water is moved more than drunk. A water skin is lifted, rocked, weighed in the wrist. A mouthful is taken, held against the palate, shared with the throat in sips that feel like stitching. Another mouthful is not swallowed. It is pressed into the headcloth at its edge and laid back across the face, so a coolness the size of 2 coins persuades the heat to argue somewhere else. A woman hands a child a wet finger to draw one clean letter on the little palm. The child closes their fist like a locket. Someone pours a thimble of oil from a stoppered gourd, olive or argan, hoarded like a secret, and a little shine passes hand to hand. Lips, then the bridge of the nose, then the backs of fingers where the sun has been asking impertinent questions. A cracked heel accepts what it is given and stops shouting. Another hand rubs a smear of ghee along the camel's girth mark where the hair is bare. Work does not stop, it changes scale. A man slides a knife from its wrap and uses the empty heat like an anvil, tapping a burr off the edge with a pebble, turning the blade to catch the light, nodding as if the steel had answered back. A woman needles through leather with palm fiber thread, reinforcing a strap where it will fail in a week if left alone. A child inspects the rolled pebbles that are the caravan's water tally, left pocket for full skins, right pocket for half, and moves one stone back again, counting out loud in a whisper so the numbers take root. Prayer comes and it is done with economy. A square of cloth unrolled, faces turned by a knowledge older than compasses, hands brushed with sand in place of water, palms to face and to forearms, the desert's own ablution when there is no well. The words are quiet, a line spoken into the heat and returned unbroken. When they are finished, the cloth rolls itself with a practiced snap, and the small rectangle of shade it made is given back to the child who was using it as a lake for a wooden animal. You learn the rules of stillness. Don't sit on your heels, blood will scold you later. Don't cross your legs tight, your feet will forget they belong. Keep your head low so the shade covers more of your face. Tuck your hands into your sleeves so the skin stops evaporating. Use your scarf as a pillow for a minute, but only a minute. Cloth warms to skin faster than you think and then becomes a second sun. The guide rests with his eyes closed and everything else awake. He holds a stick across his knees and tips it once when a breeze is about to pretend. He watches the dune faces through his lashes, the way their shadows crawl, the delicate avalanche on a slip face that means the wind has changed its word by one syllable. He does not waste the knowledge. He files it without moving. Heat remakes sound. Far noises fall away first, the world ends at the next ridge. Near noises sharpen, the tiny popping of grains contracting as the windless sun drives off their night cool, the soft crack of a date pit under a boot, a fly's nettled complaint trapped for a second under the fabric at your cheek. When someone coughs, the air pretends it did it. You think of nothing useful because useful thoughts use water. You think of the weight of your shadow, how it narrows and grows mean at noon, how yours is the shape of a blade laid flat. You think of the taste of mint, not the leaf, but the color, and your mouth waters so briefly you can feel the hope of it leave. You stop thinking, because stopping is the work. A small crisis arrives politely. A young man who has walked proud since dawn slumps, fumbles his knot, sits wrong. The guide says his name once. Another hand is already at the water skin, not to pour, to weigh. The cloth edge is wetted once and pressed into the hollows at the base of the throat and the wrists. A smear of salt is rubbed on his tongue and a crumb of sugar pressed behind it. He closes his eyes and breathes as if listening to someone explain patience. No one looks at him while he learns. When he opens his eyes, he does not get praise. He gets a date and the rope he dropped. Under the saddles and blankets, the sand is a different country. Someone scrapes out a hollow with the edge of a board, sets the water skin in it, and pulls the sand back over like a mother covering a child. A different someone tucks a clay jar into the same shallow and tells it a story about evening. When the jar is lifted later, its skin will have remembered the night for a finger's width. It will be enough to make the tea taste like hope. The beasts conserve in their own ways. A camel closes its nostrils to make the air longer. It turns its head until the shadow of its jaw lies across its own nose. Its rumen works without asking permission, a slow thunder no one hears unless the whole world is silent. A fly lands, then decides there are better errors to make. The creature exhales over your forearm, and you are briefly grateful for a breath that is not yours. In the corner of shade assigned to bundles, the dangerous world also rests. A scorpion, the yellow kind with a sting that promises days of headache and a story told quietly, curls itself under the rim of a salt slab. No one shrieks, no one kills it theatrically. A boy slides a stick under its front, lifts it as if offering it a seat in a different carriage, and walks it 10 paces away where the sun will explain the rest. Sand shows the lesson with a brief scribble that the wind erases while you watch. Time is counted by shadows, not by clocks. A peg's shade grows from a dagger to a needle to a small brush. The guide glances once at the angle along the dune's rib and nods to himself. A woman tips the kettle over just enough to wet the leaves again. Second pour, then third. Glasses rinsed with a mouthful of water no one drinks. Foam coaxed high to sweetness with a distance pour that makes a silver rope between kettle and cup. Sugar knocks against glass. The tea smells like memory wrapped in green. People sleep without moving, in portions. 10 breaths, wake. 10 breaths. Check a girth from where you lie with the hook of your fingers. 10 breaths. Shift 1 inch to keep a hip from hardening into complaint. The child with the pebbles sleeps with a hand in each pocket, a treasurer guarding 2 kingdoms. The guide does not sleep like that. When he rests, he disappears and returns without ceremony, a man who has bartered with the sun before and knows his rate. When the light finally lowers 1 tone, barely, life resumes its small noises. A strap is drawn tight by a stick and gives that satisfying rope song. A saddle pad is shaken. Sand falls in its shining stream and becomes the ground again by the time it lands. Cloths are retied, faces reappear from folds. Someone laughs once under their breath, and someone answers with 2 short notes that mean everything is still all right for now. You stand and your knees do not belong to you. Your feet have the shape of the ground printed into them. Your mouth is a quiet room where the last mint has finished talking. The sky is white at the center and blue only far away, as if blue were a luxury the day is saving for someone else. The caravan sits up, stretches into itself, and finds its voice. Bells, the soft slap of rope, the almost language of camels preparing to be landscape again. Before the first step, the guide points with his chin to the faint stain he saved earlier, the basin where sand remembers water. Not now, his hand says without moving. Later. The line accepts the promise the way thirsty people accept a story at the right time, as if it were a drink. Odes rise, not sing. A staff touches the sand and writes the first word of afternoon. And here is the 4th truth, handed to you without malice by the hour when the day stands over you. You would not last a day in a Sahara caravan, because noon itself is a task. To sit is work. To swallow is work. To keep your thoughts from spending water is work. The desert does not test you with storms, not yet, but with stillness, with a heat so constant it becomes a grammar. If you cannot read it, you pay. If you can, you still pay, only slower. The afternoon begins with a warning the sky delivers in small print. The light is the same hard white, but the dune backs wear a new grain, ripple on ripple, like a cat's fur laid the wrong way. The guide lifts his chin, reads the page, and shortens the stride a fraction. A bell changes its tone as a rope tightens, and the line draws closer without being told. Wind is not here yet, it has telegraphed ahead. You feel the first message on your teeth before your skin knows it. Grit whispers across your molars. Then the air roughens, no breeze, just motion, as if the day had become sand moving slowly in a great throat. The guide's hand goes up, 2 fingers. Cloths come higher over noses. Goggles for those who carry them go on. For the rest, coal and squint and faith. Loads are rebuckled. Salt slabs are turned outward to face what's coming. Cloth bundles come inward to hide their threads. Wind arrives as if the horizon opened a door. It is not dramatic at first, only a steady push that lays a shimmer along the dune edge and peels a skin from the slip face so fine it looks like smoke. The bells soften under it, a muffled chime. Then the push becomes a shove. Sand lifts and hangs and then runs, minute knives looking for soft places to learn. The guide does not hurry, he compresses. His staff points to a low saddle, and the caravan flows into it, taking the lee as if shade had become wind. Procedure is a language everyone speaks. Camels kneel with their tails toward the blast. Loads are lowered just enough to let the animals breathe easier, left on just enough to make walls. Blankets come off and become ramparts. Stakes go in at angles you would not have thought would hold and do. A net is thrown over the pile so the wind will have to argue with rope before it steals. People sit with backs to the animals, headcloth pulled tight, eyes narrowed to the narrowest of slits. You can taste glass. Sand finds your ears and writes its name there. It experiments with your nose and is rebuked by cloth and spit and patience. The storm's voice is not thunder. It is a long, low tearing, the sound of every dune editing itself at once. Little vortices run like animals between knees and loads, chasing their own tails to exhaustion. The air loses distance. The world ends at an arm's length. The guide sits with his stick across his knees and is still, the way a man is when counting. Time, breaths, changes in the storm's grammar. He glances once at the dune's knife edge. Does it sing? It does, a bass the bones can hear. The caravan lowers itself another inch, and in that inch there is intelligence older than any compass. You learn how to breathe in a storm. In through the cloth, slow enough that grains fall before they reach your throat. Out into the same cloth so it catches moisture and returns it. Small, but here small is a unit you respect. You keep your tongue behind your teeth. You do not rub your eyes. You do not speak. Words are water, and the wind would drink them. Time thins. The world is a series of checks. The weight of the water tally in the child's pockets. She touches both without looking. The quiet complaint of a girth that wants attention. A hand answers without leaving its shelter. The angle of a blanket that sags and is retied. A camel whose eye needs a thumb's worth of soothing at the corner, so it will close fully against grit. Sand accumulates in crescents behind every object, tiny Bartians born and dying in minutes. You brush your lap and the lap returns at once to what it was. When the wind lets go, it does not apologize. It steps 2 paces away and considers coming back. The air grows taller. Sound returns in layers. The nearest bell, the second nearest cough, the far sigh of a slip face settling, the small cry of a hawk that rode the storm's shoulder and now redraws its circles. The guide stands, shakes his cloak once. Sand becomes the ground again by the time it lands, and points with his chin. The caravan rises and moves. The track behind you is gone, as if you were never there. The desert has licked its page clean. Losing the path is not panic here, it is expected. Navigation is reassessed. The guide reads the new writing, ripple direction, the wind's hand, horned edges of small dunes. Which way the horns point tells last night's truth. The way a crust has broken on a sebka where a distant squall left its memory. He does not chase the mirage that beckons to your left. No one does. The water you see out there is a lie rehearsed so often it is perfect. A hand touches your elbow once, not to restrain but to remind. Danger less theatrical and more hungry waits where the sand thins to pale crust. Salt flat, sebka, looks like safety, level, white, forgiving. It is none of those things when last month's rain is still trapped under its shell. The guide arcs the line around it like a pen avoiding a blot. Even so, one animal tests a place where the crust is thinner by a finger's breadth. The surface caves with a sound like a plate cracking. The camel sinks to the knee in cold slime the color of old milk. This crisis is muscle, not noise. Loads come off one side in 2 breaths. A net becomes a harness. 3 men lean back in a slow, steady counterweight, while a 4th works aboard under the buried foot, chalking with handfuls of dry sand like a mason making foundations where the earth refuses to help. The camel groans, disgusted but not frightened. On account you do not hear, the men heave, the beast lunges, the board holds, the foot finds purchase, the knee unseals with a wet sound, and the whole animal climbs back into the air. The men are splattered to the waist, white and gray. Boy runs a hand down the leg to check for strain and gets a grateful snort full in the face. Loads return. The caravan detours the long way, and the guide adds a new shape to the map in his head. Heat illness is another enemy with no face. A young porter begins to make little mistakes, tying a knot twice and neither tight, stepping where the sand is young, not where it is packed, laughing once and not knowing why. The guide looks at him and then at his water hand. A cloth is wetted once and pressed under his turban against the fontanelle, then at the wrists, then the hollows behind the knees. A grain of salt on his tongue and a pinch of sugar that feels like forgiveness. He is told, without words, to walk in a different place in the line where a friend's shadow will cross him once every 20 steps. He does. Later, he will be asked to carry less for 1 hour and more the next. Here, mercy is not charity, it is balance. The desert has teeth you can see and teeth you cannot. In the lee of a thorn, a track like someone drew a necklace with a stick, the sidewinder viper's signature. The creature is buried 3 inches down, eyes level with the surface, horns dusted with the same sand as the world. No one is excited. A long stick slips under the coil. The viper flows onto it and is walked to a place where feet will not learn a lesson the wrong way. Scorpions are relocated the same way, yellow ones earning a wider arc of caution, black ones a little less. The desert's citizens are not enemies, they are laws. You obey the ones you recognize and go slower until you recognize more. Bandits are a word you do not say. Instead, there are eyes on the ridge. The guide notes them and makes 3 changes that look like one. The line draws tighter, the pace becomes fractionally brisk where the sand allows, and the loads are shuffled so that the dearest to the journey's success are less obvious. The men at the rear trade places with the men at the middle and become the rear again by degrees. Nothing happens. Often nothing is the point. In a day and a half at a well where 5 paths become one, there will be bargaining and tea and the long arithmetic of trust. For now the ridge grows uninteresting to itself and empties. Water discipline sharpens as the afternoon ages. The child with the pebbles moves one from left to right and looks at the quartermaster. He nods. The caravan slows not because of thirst, but because of ration. Skins are opened in order, not in preference. The guide tastes from one and rejects it for later. Not tainted, merely tired leather flavor best saved for tea. Another is fresher. A hand signal sends it forward to a woman with a baby whose lips are a problem now, not a theory. Your own skin feels heavy when you lift it. You drink one mouthful and then press the spout against your headcloth to give some back to your face. It feels like a sin and a sacrament. Mirage learns your name by late day. What was a wavering line becomes a lake you could walk into at a dignified pace and arrive at as a new person. It offers palm trunks and a fringe of green that is a memory your body carries from a place you are not. The guide does not correct you. He speaks to the caravan the way a shepherd speaks to a flock. Click, low call, staff angle, and the line drifts 1 degree toward a saddle you had not noticed. By the time you would have reached the lake, it is already farther away. In the middle of so much emptiness, you begin to fail at small distances. You step 3 paces away to relieve yourself and turn back, and the caravan is suddenly somewhere else. You hurry and the sand takes half your stride. Your breath goes fast. You strip your cloth down for more air and find out exactly why cloth is worn in the first place. A bell saves you, a particular bell with a nick in its voice. You walk toward that voice, not toward shapes, not toward water you imagine, and the caravan receives you without remarks. Later, someone hands you a date and the rope to carry. That is the comment. The wind, having had its large say, returns in smaller notes that still matter. It shifts 15 degrees and the fine-combed ripples on the sand turn their heads. The guide adjusts. He checks the stain he saved at midday, the basin that might remember water. By the time the sun begins to drop from white to brass, the caravan reaches a place where the ground under the top layer is a different weight to the foot. A thorn bush is greener than it deserves to be. The air smells, faintly, less like stone, more like something that grew. Men scrape with scoops they carry for this. Women scoop with hands that are scoops. Damp shows itself as darker sand 3 hands down. A hole is shaped, a bowl is set, and the seep begins. Not a pool, not even a trickle, only a patience that can be drunk if you have prepared your mouth for patience all day. Cloth filters the first mouthful. A child carries a jar like a crown. Tea will taste different tonight. Before that, another danger that is not a drama. Evening cold. The same air that burned you will take heat back as the sun lets go. Sweat that never showed its face will show its price in shivers. Fires will be coaxed from thorn and past charcoal. Blankets will be tied high again, not for dust, but for warmth. Cracks in lips will sting with mint and feel like a kind of cleanliness. You wash your hands in sand, a handful rubbed palm to palm until the oils gather grit, and the grit gathers what the day stuck to you. You think of water and do not use it for this. water has other work. You look at the line of footprints the caravan made in the last hour and watch the wind erase the oldest and soften the newest. If the storm had lasted 20 minutes longer, there would be no line at all. You understand, not as a metaphor but as a fact, how quickly a day can lose you. This is the fifth truth, and the desert does not need to raise its voice to say it. You would not last a day in a Sahara caravan because here small errors are verdicts. A mouthful at the wrong moment, 3 steps in the wrong direction, a knot you tied for comfort instead of for strain, all of them become stories the sand tells in the past tense. The caravan survives by discipline that looks like quiet, by knowledge that looks like habit, by mercy that looks like reassigning a load and not talking about why. You have learned this much by afternoon. Danger is not a storm, it is a drift. And you are always being carried by it unless you keep your hand on the rope. Evening does not arrive in the desert, it unfolds. The white of the day first tarnishes to brass, then warms to copper along the knife edges of the dunes, and finally falls into a violet that belongs to distance. Heat loosens its hand slowly, as if reluctant to admit defeat. Then all at once you feel the cool slip between your headcloth and your neck, like a blade sheathed the right way. People breathe differently. Camels lift their heads and consider the world with more charity. The caravan stands, stretches, and lengthens itself for the night miles, the ones that count double because they cost less water. Ropes slide back through familiar palms. Loads rise, settle, are argued with, and then consent. A girth is taken one more hole, a blanket is squared. The salt slabs go on first because they are honest about weight and shape. Cloth bales and skins find their balance around that truth. A boy walks the line with a small mallet and 2 pegs, tapping every bell until each sings the note it should. He listens for a nick or a crack. Bells are not decoration here but language, and once he stops, pulls a tiny wedge of leather from his pouch and tucks it under a tongue to take a sourness out of the tone. When he is done, the caravan hums in one key. Clothing changes meaning. Headcloths that were walls against grit become hoods against the coming cold. A thin wool aba appears on shoulders and becomes shadow-colored in an instant. Sandals are retied with a loose grace to leave blood where blood needs to stay when the night pulls heat from the ground. Someone smears a fingertip of coal back along a lower lid where sweat had washed it thin, less for looking fine than for stealing a little glare from the western sky as it refuses to go quietly. The guide stands a little apart and looks up in a way that is not romantic. He's counting, not stars but landmarks that happen to be made of fire. The evening star declares itself first, bright enough to make a promise of direction before the sky dares turn black. Low in the north, a steady nail holds the world's tent. To the east, 3 in a row rise like a belt someone is lifting onto a shoulder. He notes arcs and angles, then returns to the sand and reads what the wind wrote this afternoon. The new set of ripples dull as uncombed hair, the horns on small barchins pointing the way last night's breath traveled. A wrinkle where a crust lies thin over a salt patch he meant to skirt anyway. He sets the staff to the ground, and the caravan's sentence begins. In the hour after sunset, The desert smells like something after rain, even when it hasn't rained in months. The cooling of stone, the whisper of a crushed leaf under a thorn tuft, leather giving up the day's sun in a warm animal breath. Flies vanish all at once as if a door shut on them. Beetles appear in their place, busy and grave. A small owl lifts from a dark bush without sound, rides the first real breeze, and drops again in a parabola that ends with a rustle and a silence. Far off, a fox laughs exactly once and is satisfied with the joke. The pace changes. In the light, the caravan's stride is modest, economy masquerading as patience. In the cool, the same bodies spend what they saved. Steps lengthen, the line breathes a little wider. The animals like this hour best. Their pads plant and lift with a new rhythm, left, right, left, and the small settle between, that moves you the way a cradle moves a child. The bells brighten and space themselves. The human hum that buttressed them at noon falls away to leave the sky room to speak. You learn dusk's work. Every quarter hour, fingers that belong to you but have learned new intelligence check the scarf at your throat, the knot at your crown, the one raw place where the sandal's thong crosses the bone. You shake sand from the inside of the heel, not now, or it will blister when the cold comes, only before the cold arrives. You unroll the small strip of cloth you tucked under your waistband at noon and wrap it around the sore place on the saddle's crosspiece. The camel's shoulder will thank you for it more than your own bones will. You hand a date forward without turning your head. It walks to the guide by palm and comes back as 3 notes of approval that belong to no particular person and to everyone. Twilight is a map that draws itself while you walk. Dunebacks, which at noon were undifferentiated blade, take on volume. Troughs go from mere darker to navigable. Where the sand stands high, its windward slope keeps a little light longer, and the guide uses that hoarded silver to stitch lines from saddle to saddle. He avoids knife edges by instinct. He prefers the long, easy shadow to the short, heroic ridge. Sometimes he lifts his staff and points to what looks like nothing, a shallow seam in the trough where damp has been trapped under the top layer, a darker brushstroke in the lee of a thorn clump where the night will fall thicker. He is not showing you beauty. He is showing you how to arrive. The caravan speaks to itself in practical poetry. Peace on your path, someone says without volume when the line kinks, and the one who made the kink answers by lifting the rope instead of the voice. On your left, a woman murmurs when she walks a load past a knee, and the knee moves of its own accord. A child, half asleep in the crook of a saddle, wakes long enough to open both hands in her lap and feel the pebbles, one pocket for full skins, one for tired ones. She does not switch any. She just reminds the numbers they are being watched. Light thins. A bright planet burns a hole in the west. The first real stars take their places by habit. The sky goes blue, then bruised, then a black that is not absence but population. The Milky Way does not appear. It insists. A river you could believe would make your mouth wet if you stared long enough. The guide does not stare. His eyes slip between sky and sand and back again, matching one ledger to another. This is how the caravan stays a line instead of becoming a story people tell about bones. When the wind returns after dark, it is a companion, not a judge. It moves the cloth a finger's width away from your lips and gives you back your breath lightly cooled. It steals heat from the day stored in your scarf and asks for interest. You repay by drawing the wool across your shoulders and keeping your hands in your sleeves until the blood learns the new rate. The same breeze writes a low music across the dune's edge, nothing like the storm's tearing, more like a thumb on a drumskin far away. The bells answer in small, polite syllables. There is still hazard here, only smaller and closer. Night wraps distances in kindness and hides edges with the same cloth. The guide shortens the stride a fraction so the line doesn't saw itself against a slip phase. When the sand thins to pebble, the sound underfoot changes from hush to faint click, and every head in the line acknowledges it without looking. A low bench of rock crosses the trough. The first camel steps up, and the rest, by memory of that gait, prepare their knees before they meet the rise. A hand lands briefly on a load in front to steady it over the seam. The hand belongs to someone behind, and neither thanks nor apology travels with the touch. This is how cities walk in the dark. An hour after full dark, hunger wakes not for food but for heat. A woman pulls a coal from a clay jar that has carried its ember since the last camp. She breathes it back into life and tucks it deep again. Others check their small stores of warmth, an oiled skin that doesn't smell tired, the square of felt that kept a child's back from forgetting itself at noon, the extra rope that is nothing in the daytime and shelter at night if the wind decides to remember being cruel. The guide's staff taps twice. It's not a halt. It's a narrowing. You answer by walking nearer the bell you know and letting the stranger bell go, for now, to someone whose stride fits its particular note. On the second rise after that, you crest into a slow-moving shine, moonlight, thin and clean. It is not much, but after the black it feels like a promise. The dunes show you their ribs, the troughs admit they are roads. A pale, low shrub throws a shadow you can step on. Far ahead, 3 darker lumps declare a different geography. Rock, not sand. The guide tilts toward them by a degree and you all fall toward that tilt as if the world had leaned. This is the hour when meetings happen, if they happen. Tonight they do. A glow appears on a distant shoulder, too low and too steady to be a star. Another answers farther off. Those are not strangers. Those are warnings against becoming strangers by accident. The guide lifts his staff, and the line pulls inward until you can hear the quiet catch of someone else's breath. When the other caravan goes near enough to count, the 2 leaders step forward alone to let the distance speak first. Then there are words, few flattened by cloth and night. From where? From where to? Water? Hands gesture, not at goods but at skins, at the sky, at the ground. News is traded. A well 2 days south drawing slow. A patch of crust that will take a camel to the knee if you seek the shorter way. Wind out of the west last night that was more boast than act. Someone passes a tiny glass, and a mouthful of boiled bitterness buys a measure of trust. No one counts the sugar. A nod ends it. The caravan slide past one another like fish schooling separate. Bells comparing notes for 3 heartbeats, then parting. You walk on. Cold has hands now. It finds your wrists first, then the smalls of your knees, then the bones along your feet that had forgotten they could complain. You pull the wool tighter and it answers for a while. Breath spreads white along the cloth at your mouth and turns your own scent back to you clean and animal. When the guide chooses to press another mile into the ledger, no one objects. These miles are cheap and precious. They will be salt tomorrow and barter next month. Fatigue becomes not a weight but a rhythm. You are inside it and it inside you. Your thoughts narrow again to the good small ones, the particular bell you follow, the truth that your water is heavier returned than empty, the rule that you do not stop near the crest even to fix a strap, because silhouettes are for the sky to own, not for a caravan to offer. When it is time to lift and drink, you do it without looking like a man drawing a letter you have learned by tracing 1,000 times. The mouthful goes where mouths know to send it. Palate, throat, the little soft place behind the sternum where hope lives. You do not drink twice. At last, the guide chooses a punctuation mark. Not a full stop, never that, but a comma large enough to breathe inside. The place is not beautiful. It is correct. A low ring of rock breaks the wind a shoulder's height. A thorn clump promises fuel. The sand there has the right kind of damp under its skin to keep a small fire from scandalizing the night. Above it all, a constellation stands exactly where he expected. The staff end touches sand and makes the tiny circle that is his signature. Loads come down in reverse of the way they rose. Knots remember which way they were meant to fall apart. A net becomes a windbreak, a saddle a wall. The brazier opens an eye and brings the word tea into the air like a hymn. A boy checks the pebbles, left pocket, right, then stands on his toes to whisper the totals into the quartermaster's ear. A woman pulls a pinch of mint from a cloth twist and crumbles it between finger and thumb. The scent is green. Your mouth floods with a water it does not deserve and then recovers its discipline as the first glass makes its circuit. For the desert, for the men, for the women and children, for stories. You are shivering now, not violently, just at the fine edges. The day has taken one thing and the night takes another. You thought evening would be kindness. It was only a different price list. The beauty is real. There is no denying the sky, but you do not get to trade in beauty here. You get to trade in steps and breath and mouthfuls measured by knowledge older than roads. This is the sixth truth, spoken softly as the bells go quiet and the first glass burns its way back to your hands. You would not last a day in a Sahara caravan because even evening, the hour you thought would forgive, does not. It asks you to spend what you saved, to move when you want to rest, to accept cold where heat just stood, to read stars while your bones ask for sleep. The desert does not relent at sunset. It simply changes the terms. Night is a craft the caravan knows by hand. The camp doesn't so much appear as assemble itself from what the day carried. Loads become walls, saddles become windbreaks, ropes become doorways. The guide chooses the leeward side of a low rock lip. The first pegs bite the sand at angles learned from older storms. Blankets are slung from salt slabs to make roofs the height of a seated man. Between two saddles, a net stretches into a screen that hums softly when the breeze remembers to speak. In 5 minutes, there is a village where there was only wind. The animals are seen to first. Camels fold, joints creaking like old leather chests. Bells are slipped off so the night keeps its own rhythm. A hobble looped around the front legs asks them to stay close. A knee rope on the wanderers says it a little louder. A boy walks the line with a handful of thorn twigs. Each beast sniffs, snorts, and mouths them, more for the ritual than the calories. A sore girth mark gets a thumb's worth of tallow and ash rubbed in, the mix dark and clean smelling. A cracked lip along a camel's muzzle is dabbed with honey from a tiny gourd that travels for nothing else. A man runs his palm up under a saddle pad and nods at the heat still living there. He lifts the felt so it will cool on both sides and not carry trouble into tomorrow. Fire is persuasion, not spectacle. Fuel is counted. Thorn, a twist of dry grass, a coin of charcoal saved from last night. A spark is coaxed into a coal with flint and patience, the coal into a flame with breath measured the way water is. Pots appear, blackened bellies thin as bells. Someone rattles a bag of lentils that sound like rain on tin. Another shakes out a pinch of cumin and a flake of dried lemon rind and makes the air forget its stone for a moment. Water from the seep, cloth filtered, goes into the pot. You can hear it decide to be soup. Salt shaves from a block with a knife. The slivers look like moon scraps. Dates are split and tucked in last so they soften into pockets of sweetness that surprise the tongue. Bread is forged directly from sand and ash. A woman kneads a small dough, flour, salt, the saved grey water from rinsing bowls, into a round the size of her hand and thicker. She hollows a place in the coals with a flat stick, lays the dough in the hot sand and covers it with ash so fine it hisses. 15 breaths later she lifts it, knocks the desert off with the same stick, and the inside steams white. She cuts it with string. The string keeps the crumb honest. Tea is a ceremony that stitches warmth into the night. The kettle sings first. Loose leaves answer with a bitterness that must be bargained down. The first pour is thrown onto the sand for the desert. The second is high from a distance until it foams like the thought of rain. It's poured back into the kettle and taught manners. Sugar clicks in the bottom of tiny glasses and doesn't surrender at once. Mint is crumbled between finger and thumb. Its smell travels farther than the firelight. The first glass wakes everything. The second explains it. The third forgives it. Work changes scale but does not stop. A sandal thong is rewrapped with palm fiber, spliced by lamplight with an awl and a square of leather shaved from a saddle skirt. A lash rope is served where it chafed, a tight winding of finer cord that will bear tomorrow's strain. A woman overstitches the edge of a waterskin nipple so it won't split at noon. The quartermaster squats with the child and her pebbles. She pours one pocket into one hand, full skins, the other into the other, tired ones, and he nods with his mouth, not his eyes, as if agreeing with an old story. Salt slabs are counted by touch. A cloth bale is retied with a knot that will fall apart right-handed at dawn. Clean comes without water. Hands are scrubbed with sand until the skin squeaks. The grit lifts the oil and takes the day with it. A blackened pot is polished inside with a handful of clean sand and a patience that makes it shine. A rag rubs the soot on the outside to a luster that passes for pride. A spoon is wiped with the hot bread heel, a method that removes both grease and a mouthful of hunger in one gesture. The mint stalks, once exhausted, dry by the brazier to become tomorrow's kindling. Nothing leaves the circle without a job to do later. Voices stay low, not from secrecy but thrift. Stories belong to the firelight's reach. An old man tells one he has told in 3 different deserts, of a well hidden under a dune that moved and of a star that does not. His hands do most of the speaking. A woman sings the soft work song she uses for kneading. Tonight it kneads the day down instead. A boy recites the names of wells as if they were kings. Tabelbala, Arawan, Bilma. Between names, the guide corrects him once with a finger, and the boy places the new syllable where it belongs. The only loudness is laughter, and even that is the kind that falls back into chests quickly, mindful of the cold waiting just beyond the blanket wall. Prayers are economy too. A square of woven mat unrolls, its warp and weft holding more dawns than the camp can count. There is no water for washing, sand does the work, palms and forearms dusted in a rhythm that looks like remembering. Bodies orient without debate. Words go up and come back down, warmed and lie over the camp like another layer of cloth. When the mat rolls, the shadow it made remains in the mind and is enough. Guard is taken without fuss. There is no drawn lot, there is a glance. The men who sleep light sleep first, the ones who can sleep standing sleep later. Watches turn on stars, not clocks. When the Pleiades clear the saddle, when Orion lifts his belt, when the bright one touches the rock's edge. A lantern is shaded to a thumbnail of glow that reads as warm, not as invitation. The watch walks the camp's low perimeter, hand trailing along rope and saddle and net, touching what the eye cannot see. He listens to hooves tamping softly, camels shifting to make their own beds deeper, and to the far call of jackal that sounds like laughter but isn't. He tips a little sand over any ember that has ambitions. The cold arrives with a courtesy you're not ready for. It doesn't strike, it collects, at wrists, at the smalls of knees, at the bones on the top of the foot. Wool cloaks lift, headcloths shift from shields to hoods. Breath becomes visible and domestic, trapped by the cloth at your mouth and turned back on your face as a small, honest gift. You pull your feet onto the rug and tuck the cloak edge under your heels to make a pocket for heat to live in. You are taught this by watching, not by being told. Your fingers learn the way to fold under your armpits without cramping your shoulders. Your shoulders learn to share warmth with your cheeks by lifting the cloak like a nest. Dinner is not much and is everything. The lentils have surrendered their shape into silk. The dates inside are small explosions of yes. The bread tastes faintly of ash in a way that feels like a place, not a flaw. A sliver of dried cheese, nearly translucent, salts a corner of the mouth that had gone dumb all afternoon. Tea burns a line from tongue to chest and draws the world closer to the brazier. A child falls asleep upright, tea glass still warm in both hands, Someone takes it gently and replaces it with a rolled felt strip to keep the hands from missing the shape. Repairs wait their turn with the same patience the desert requires. A cameleer threads a needle with horsehair because nothing else will be strong and thin enough to pass the eyelets of a precious bridle. The hole in the leather is awl from the inside to keep its lip smooth. A woman braids a 3-strand cord from palm fiber, spitting a little on her fingers to keep the strands behaving. The cord will become a new tie for the cloth bale that leaked dust today. A man scrapes a peg to a new point with a shard of pottery. The shard returns to the pouch because sharp is a currency. The sky does its theater and no one claps. The Milky Way is a road and a rule. The guide reads it like a ledger. The moon, if it's there, is not romance but lamp. If it isn't, the stars are sufficient for anyone who knows why they were named. A shooting star is a thing you note with your eyes and not your mouth. A planet hangs so steady that children decide it's a nail holding up the world's tent. No one corrects them tonight. The cold carves the air into something the lungs know how to keep. Small mercies move around the circle like coins. Someone slides their cloak edge toward another's bare ankle and pretends not to notice. A piece of honeycomb, brown, waxy, almost nothing, gets unknown hands around it and returns smaller to the pouch. A headcloth is retied for an older man while he pretends to be telling a story to a child. A match is struck inside a cupped hand to relight a stubborn twig. The hand smells of sulfur and a day's work and something clean. There are warnings you would miss if you were alone. The wind backs a finger's width and the brazier's flame leans toward the rock instead of away. Somebody shifts a screen a span and the flame stands straight again. The camels all sigh within a minute of one another, a change of posture that says the temperature dropped by a measure the animals own. A few cloaks rise at once in answer. Beetle blunders against your hand like a little tank. You put it on the far side of the windbreak and tell it silently to do its work elsewhere. At last the circle slackens. Bowls are stacked. The grey water from rinsing them is saved for mixing tomorrow's dough. Embers are banked under a shallow of sand. A flat stone goes over the brazier's mouth to keep a spark from loving the wind too much. The bellboy hangs 2 bells from a peg where the wind will speak through them if the animals wander. Their notes would wake the right ears. The quartermaster tucks the pebbles back into the child's pockets with a gravity that makes her proud in her sleep. The guide draws a shape with the end of his staff, small, habit, nothing, and scuffs it out again, a signature only the sand needs to read. Sleep is not a gift, it is a trade. Rugs are unrolled and made thick at the hips with folded cloth because bones remember tomorrow. Saddles become headboards. A headcloth becomes a veil against dew and mosquitoes that will come from nowhere at the hour before dawn. A scorpion check is done with a stick around the circle out of respect, not fear. The cold settles in with you, and then, slowly, with the small heat of bodies and breath, agrees to hold still. Your last sense of the world is a braid of small sounds, the quiet punctuation of a camel chewing, the thin, clean cricket scrape of a beetle's legs on the brazier rim, a watchman's foot rolling heel to toe without a sound that doesn't belong to the sand, the tea kettle's lid ticking as it gives up the day. the bells on the peg breathing with the breeze. Above, the stars hold their positions as promised. Beside you, your water skin is a warm, heavy crescent at your ribs, a promise you bought with patience. And there is the seventh truth, laid softly over your shoulders with the wool. You would not last a day in a Sahara caravan because night is not rest. It is the other half of the work. The fire is small because fuel is counted. The voices are low because warmth is rationed. Even sleep has rules and equipment. Beauty is real, but it does not do your chores. Here, the dark is not an end, but an agreement. Spend what you saved, fix what will break. Fold yourself small against the cold, and be ready to rise when the sky becomes iron again. The cold deepens by degrees that only wrists and knees can count. Sleep is not a single thing but a braid. Doze, wake, listen, turn, warm the spot you just left, doze again. The rug remembers your shape and the sand remembers your bones. Breath gathers on the cloth over your mouth and comes back to you as a small mercy, warm and familiar, tinged with mint and smoke and wool. The watch turns on stars instead of clocks. When the Pleiades clear the saddle of rock, one man touches another's shoulder and trades the cloak from his own back to the other's without a word, a warmth passed like a coin. The lantern stays shaded to a thumbprint of glow. It is enough to read rope with your hands. The guard walks the camp's shallow perimeter, palm brushing the net, the lashings, the low windbreak, letting touch stand in for sight. He pauses with a hand on the nearest camel's neck to feel that slow, furnace heartbeat and the shiver that moves along the animal's hide when frost-thin air tests it. Second hand checks the hobble knot, the kind that holds without biting. The world outside the fabric walls continues its own quiet arithmetic. Jackals draw a circle around the camp at the distance where scent is story and not invitation. Their calls sound like laughter told to the sand. A small owl shifts from thorn to thorn, head turning through half a circle so smoothly it might be a lid closing and opening on the night. Beetles work like tiny tanks, deliberate and armored. One thumps the brazier's rim and topples backward, then rights itself with a crisp, self-possessed kick and disappears into a groove a child's heel left at dusk. The wind backs a finger's width. The watchman notices because the brazier's ember, banked under its shallow of sand, leans the other way. In a corner of the camp, someone coughs, the dry desert kind, and a palm rubs a back in steady circles until the body remembers the rate of the night. Another body wakes to the insistence of a cramp and presses the arch of a foot into a folded saddle pad to teach the muscle better ideas. A scorpion check is done once more by habit, stick first, then hand, around the blanket edges. The yellow kind is escorted, lifted on the stick as if it had paid for a ride, 10 steps beyond the wall and set down facing away. The sand records the favor with a brief scribble and forgets. Between watches, the guide sleeps like a door, fully closed or fully open. When it is his turn, he stands and looks up for only as long as it takes to place the sky back onto the sand. Low in the north, the nail that holds the world's tent is exactly where it purchased the last hour. Orion's belt has lifted. His hand will lift when it is time to wake the camp. For now, he listens. the near hush of sleeping animals chewing contentment into the dark, the far hush of a slip face rearranging itself into tomorrow's edge. The hour before dawn is the sharpest. Cold has teeth then. It finds collarbones and the thin bones in fingers and the rim of each ear. Cloaks ride higher, headcloths fold down into hoods. A shared border forms along a line of sleeping shoulders as the edge of one blanket accidentally trespasses onto another. Someone's teeth click once, loud to their own ears and to no one else's. The child with the water pebbles stirs and checks her pockets even in sleep. Left hand, right hand, all still there. The quartermaster smiles into the dark and lets her sleep again. A spark is teased back to stubborn life in the brazier, coaxed with a sliver of charcoal and the slow bellows of practiced breath. Flame is not spectacle, it is permission. The kettle's lid ticks and then begins to hum. Steam threads upward, scenting the air with metal first and then with tea. The first pour is still for the desert. Habit is heavier than sleep. The second becomes warmth in glass. The mint, bruised between finger and thumb, is green enough to be hope. Sugar clicks. Tiny glasses pass, warming finger bones, waking mouths. Prayers are economy and direction at once. Sand scrubs palms and forearms in the place of water. Mats unroll. Bodies orient without consulting anything but knowledge that lives in the ribs. Words rise and return like breath, laying a thin additional blanket over the camp. When the mats roll again, the shadow they made stays in the mind and is enough. Before light has a color, work begins small. A girth strap, checked with 2 fingers slid under, a sore place under a saddle pad, rubbed with a thumb of tallow. The edge of a sandal thong softened and rewrapped so it will not argue later. A woman unknots the twist that holds the morning's dough. Yesterday's grey rinse water has been waiting in a covered bowl. It meets flour and salt and becomes obedient under her hands. She presses rounds into the brazier's hot sand, covers them with ash, waits the measured breaths, lifts them, knocks the desert off, and stacks them in a cloth so they will keep their steam. The child wakes properly, sits up, and pours the pebbles from one pocket into one palm, full skins, then the other pocket into the other, tired ones. The quartermaster does not look surprised by the count. He nods the way men nod at a sunrise they have learned to expect, but not to own. She puts the pebbles back and stands a little taller. Camels are woken respectfully. A hand slides along a long, warm neck. A voice uses the syllables each beast knows as its true name. Bells. 2 tonight left on a peg to speak if the herd wandered, are rehung and tuned with a little leather wedge slipped under the tongue to sweeten a sour note. A boy carries thorn twigs. Each muzzle investigates, lips folding them in gently, ritual more than feeding. Hobbles off, knee ropes loosened. The animals rise in their 2-stage ascent, back first then front, groaning as if they too had kept the watch. Their breath hangs as pale flags. Their eyes look lacquered in the last of the night. Breakfast is the smallest arithmetic that still adds up. A heel of hot ash bread torn with clean hands, a smear of ghee that shines like a promise, 2 dates split and pressed on the tongue until sweetness liquefies. tea bitter enough to draw the day's outline and sweet enough to color it in. A child gets the corner with the most steam. A man counts sips out of habit, not miserliness. The guide refuses a second glass until the bellboy has had his first. Hierarchy and kindness are the same rule here when they are written correctly. Light arrives as iron before it decides to be silver. The east does not brighten so much as whiten. The sky goes from black with stars to black with fewer stars to a charcoal that has been breathed on. In that grey, every seam in the sand is legible, the ripples sharp, the trough soft, the scars of last night's wind easy to read and so to avoid. The guide marks 3 choices with his chin: a long, low saddle that saves breath, a short, steep knife that saves time, a middle way whose shadow will last the hour it's needed and no more. He picks the first. No one argues, arguments use air. The seep they scraped yesterday has given back what it could through the night. A shallow bowl of darker sand yields a dented pot's worth, filtered through cloth and patience. It is not cold, but it is cooler than any other part of the world. The first mouthful goes into the kettle, the second into a small jar for a child, the third into an oiled skin set aside for the guide's measure and no one else's. The whole is covered deliberately, as if tucking a small, tired animal back under its nest. Breaking camp is the same craft reversed. Ropes come down and remember which way to coil without becoming snarls. Nets are folded into rectangles that will unfold clean later, not in angry ropes. Blankets are shaken once and rolled. Sand falls in shining streams and becomes ground again by the time it lands. Salt slabs take their rightful places nearest the camel's spines. Cloth bales and skins settle around them like common sense. Not sing when they are right. The boy walks the bell line with his mallet and pegs, taps each until it answers in the note he knows, fixes one with a nib of softened leather, gives his small approval in a sound only he and the bells understand. Clothing reassigns itself. Hoods become headcloth again. The scarf over the mouth loosens a finger's breadth until the sun decides to speak. Sandals tighten a hole to tell blood where to go when heat comes back to collect its debt. Coal is rubbed true at the rim of an eye where the night's tears, small and involuntary, thinned it. A heel gets a strap of felt where yesterday's sand taught a lesson. Hands are scrubbed with clean sand until the skin squeaks. The pot is polished inside with grit and pride. Outside, soot is rubbed to a sheen. The camp returns to bundles and to memory. Camels kneel on command or complaint, often both. Loads rise. A heave, a tuck, a twist of stick to bring the lashing tight, the low hum of rope under strain that means it will hold. The animal mutters its opinion into the daylight and is ignored with affection. A sore place is checked one more time, a fold of felt added, a nod exchanged between the 2 hands that know this work in the dark as well as in the white noon. Before the first step, the guide stands still and lets the last of the night's cool wash over his face through the cloth. He looks once to the north where the nail star holds, once to the west where the last planet still insists it is a lamp, then drops his eyes to the ground where the day will actually be lived. Staff down. A single bell speaks. The line draws itself thin, then long. The caravan leaves a script across the first ridge that the wind will read and erase by noon. The first minutes are a gift you cannot squander. Sand is firm where the night pressed it. Your foot lands and keeps what it earned. Breath is cheap and can be spent on the small work that would be cruel at noon. A strap set perfect, a girth retied to fall away right-handed later, a water tally rehearsed pebble by pebble so the child can count with the speed of certainty when heat turns numbers slippery. Voices are used sparingly and travel forward, not back. On your left, mind the low, step. As the sun finally declares itself, brass coin lifting edges too bright to look at, the caravan has already bought an hour from the day. Shadows are long and generous. A man walks in another man's shade without asking and then gives it back. The wind, if it moves at all, moves kindly from behind. The air tastes like iron about to become heat. Far ahead, the guide angles toward a saddle whose shadow will hold just long enough to bring you into the basin, beyond where a thorn waits to be fire tonight, and a damp underskin of sand promises the kettle will sing twice before the world turns white again. And here is the eighth truth, spoken in the hour between frost on the cloth and fire in the sky. You would not last a day in a Sahara caravan, because dawn is not rest's end, it is labor's renewal. The night did not forgive the day, it merely changed the tools. You wake to trades already due, warmth for movement, silence for miles, discipline for water you have not yet drunk. If you cannot pay at first light, if you rise slow, if you talk loud, if you spend breath as if the sun won't collect, you are in arrears before the heat even speaks. The caravan pays in patience and practice and leaves on time. The desert takes its interest either way. By the time the sun climbs from brass to white again, the hour you bought at dawn is already spent. The sand gives back its firmness grain by grain. Wind forgets its gentleness and remembers its edge. The guide's staff ticks its patient tempo. Bells keep the sentence of the caravan steady while heat tries to erase the verbs. You move as you were taught. Short steps in the trough, never on the knife. Breath through cloth, slow enough that grains fall before they reach your throat. Water touched to the palate, not swallowed by appetite but by agreement. Work shrinks to fit the noon. A knot tightened with a stick, a strap padded with felt, a sore place soothed with a thumb of tallow. Words are measured as carefully as sips. The child checks her pockets, pebbles left for full, right for tired, and nods to the quartermaster without waking up all the way. Midday is merciless but legible. Shade is a blade under every object. You ease yourself into a ribbon of it as into a promise. The kettle sings in a whisper, fed by a coal carried across miles. Tea climbs bitter and is taught manners. Mint crumbles and lifts a green the day had tried to burn out of you. Bread emerges from ash, knocked clean with the same stick that buried it. A date softens on your tongue. Salt stings a crack on your lip and writes a small temporary blessing there. You sleep for 10 breaths, wake to check a girth without sitting up, sleep for 10 more. The guide's face is a map of patience. When he opens his eyes, the camp rises with him as if the hour itself had been persuaded. After afternoon tests you with the kind of danger that looks like nothing. Mirage lays lakes down and lifts them again, as tireless as breath. The wind turns a degree and the ripples turn their heads. The line answers by angling a degree as well. A crusted salt pan pretends to be help, and the guide detours a long way to save a knee. A lash frays where it crosses the honest edge of a salt slab. 3 hands and a sandal thong make it whole before the load remembers the idea of falling. A viper's necklace track scribbles near a thorn. A stick escorts the law to a safer court. No one wastes ore spends water. You pass a ring of stones that truly is a well this time, not merely the memory of one. The rope-worn lip is cool under the palm. The water is real, thin, and slow, pulled up hand over hand, filtered through cloth, portioned by the same ledger that counts pebbles. News gathers under the scant shade the way flies would, if flies were not forbidden by the hour. Wind from the west tomorrow, a caravan seen 3 nights back with 2 lame beasts. A story about a man who drank with his eyes and learned arithmetic he did not like. Salt shaves into a pot, a pinch of cumin wakes, a sliver of lemon rind makes courage of thin soup. A stranger's glass goes first. The guide watches the horizon as if it were answering his questions in a low voice only he can hear. Evening unfolds again, copper on the dune knives, violet in the distance. Cold slips between headcloth and neck like a quiet advice. Spend what you saved. Miles grow cheaper as the sky darkens and the animal's breath stops smelling like day. Bells brighten. The line lengthens. The guide counts lamps in the sky the way a scribe counts letters. Steadfast nail to the north, 3 in a row lifting like a belt to the east, a planet steady enough to be a nail itself. The caravan's sentence keeps its grammar. Low, long, never heroic where heroism would cost tomorrow's water. Another glow appears on a far shoulder, too low and steady to be a star. A quiet exchange in the night. From where? To where? Wind. Hands gesture at skins and sky and ground. 2 kettles argue softly. 1 glass crosses the gap and buys a measure of trust. A warning about a patch of crust comes back in trade for a rumor of a generous seep 3 ridges south. Bells compare notes for 3 heartbeats. The caravans part like fish schooling separate, each keeping its cord. Night is a craft, not a relief. Loads become walls, saddles become doorways, the net a humming screen. Camels fold and forgive the day. Bells come off so darkness can keep its own rhythm. Fuel is coins counted aloud, thorn, grass twist, charcoal. Fire is persuasion, not spectacle. Lentils surrender shape into silk. Dates inside are small explosions of yes. Bread comes clean from ash because practice is a kind of piety. Hands are washed with sand until the skin squeaks. A pot is polished inside with grit until it shines like a good intention. Outside, soot is rubbed to a useful luster. Voices keep close to the fire's reach. A song for kneading becomes a song for untying the day. The guide corrects the name of a well with 1 finger and the boy places the syllable where it belongs. Prayers are economy. Sand for water, mat for world, words for warmth that spreads farther than cloth. Guard turns on stars, not on clocks. When the Pleiades clear the saddle. when the bright one touches the rock's edge. A lantern is shaded to a thumbnail glow, enough to read rope with the hand. The watchman listens to hooves tamp, to a slip-face sigh into a new edge, to a jackal drawing a precise circle of mockery around the camp, to the small exact tick of a kettle lid giving up its heat. Cold finds bones and asks its price. Cloaks rise, headcloths become hoods. Shared border appears between blankets and no one mentions it. A child tips pebbles from left to right and back again in her sleep. The quartermaster smiles in the dark and lets the numbers keep their own watch. A scorpion is lifted on a stick and escorted beyond the wall with the courtesy due to a citizen obeying the law elsewhere. Someone slides a cloak edge toward a bare ankle and pretends not to. Honey the size of a thumb is divided into enough pieces to mean something. When sleep comes, it is not a gift. It is the other half of trade. Rugs are thick at the hip, saddles are headboards, cloth is veil and breath and small mercy. You fold yourself into the knowledge you borrowed all day, how to lie without stiffening, how to keep wrist warm so fingers behave at dawn, how to keep one ear open for a bell hung on a peg to speak if the animals wander. The sky does its theater and no one claps. Beauty is real. It does not lighten a load. And as your breath slows and the bells on the peg breathe with the breeze, the desert lays the final arithmetic in your hands. You would not last a day in a Sahara caravan, not because you are weak, but because a day here is not a day as you know it. Morning is discipline, noon is stillness that works, afternoon is a ledger of small decisions that all matter. Evening is a receipt you pay in steps, and night is repairs, rationed warmth, and agreements with stars. Every comfort is borrowed, every mouthful negotiated, every shadow earned, and every mistake priced in a currency you didn't know you carried. Skin, spit, silence, attention, patience. This is the ninth truth, spoken as the fire turns to an ember and the wind writes a softer music on the screen. The desert is not cruel. It is indifferent. It notices only weight and heat and water and time. The caravan survives by being a town that remembers its rules when the world has none. Bells tuned, knots that fall apart the right way at dawn, pebbles balanced between small hands, tea poured 4 ways so even the sand is taught its part. Let the kettle tick itself quiet. Let the embers be banked and the stone set over the brazier's mouth. Let the guide draw his small circle with the staff and scuff it away again. The camels chew the dark into a deeper dark. The jackal's circle widens and dissolves. Above, the nail holds and the bright ones keep their appointed places. Your water skin is a warm crescent at your ribs. The rug knows your shape. The sand forgives your weight for now. Close your eyes. The dunes will keep their edges without you. The wind will edit the page and remove your steps as it always meant to. The caravan will rise when the sky becomes iron again and spend dawn's cheap miles with the same quiet thrift. Your breath can become the only work you do. In, through wool and mint and smoke. Out, into the same cloth and back again as a small harmless flame. Sleep. The desert will go on being itself. The bells will keep their note. And somewhere, Far ahead or far behind, a shallow basin will remember water, patient as the hand that taught you to drink.